Thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to be looking at sugar, the first deadly white from my new book, The 7 Deadly Whites. There's been a lot of press and internet coverage recently about the dangers of sugar, most of which is true, as there is nothing positive to say about it. Sugar's entire history from the moment Columbus took sugarcane with him on his second voyage in 1493 to Hispaniola is seeped in murder, slavery, deception and ill health. The barbaric forced migration of Africans, which saw 13 million of the 20 million who survived the atrocious crossings forced to work in the sugar plantations, all to feed the sugar drug rush that was spreading throughout the upper classes in Europe. Even in its earliest days of addiction, 17th century physicians had coined the phrase sugar blues. However, as the price dropped significantly with the emergence of European beet sugar, it became not just a minority of the rich going off their rockers from sugar consumption, it became a minority of the public, and this numbered well into the tens of thousands. This initial emergence of sugar to the public's diet was similar to watching an entire town getting addicted to crystal meth or crack cocaine. The establishment of mental institutions or insane asylums through the late 18th and 19th centuries was to cater in part for those who had been too badly affected by sugar's sudden availability. Sugar has absolutely no health benefits or nutritional content. It is actually a poison. This was first observed in 1793 when 5 shipwreck survivors, who had only had to endure 9 days till they were rescued, were thoroughly ravaged, having had only sugar and rum to survive on. With some water, they would have been fine. Subsequent scientific tests left scientists surprised as to how quickly dogs and rats died when fed only sugar. This immediately alerted the sugar industry to distance itself from scientific meddling in their affairs. And so began the whole field of pseudo-scientific research used by all industries today to distance themselves from the inconvenient truth about the deleterious effects of their various trades. This, and the huge amounts of money spent by the sugar industry in trying to present their commodity as a desirable one, with Nestle, Coca-Cola, Mars and PepsiCo each spending over $3 billion every year on advertising alone. Believe it or not, it has long been known that the removal of sugar from the diet is a likely prevention and even cure for cancer, diabetes and heart disease, depending of course on how well advanced the diseases have become. In regards to cancer, the answers to this were far more clear in the 1920s and 30s than they are today. In 1931, Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for stating cancer cells died in the absence of glucose, because glucose is cancer's favourite food. Of course, today, our diets are saturated in glucose-forming foods from all of the deadly food whites. Without glucose, cancer cannot proliferate. The medical industry is well aware of this fact. That's why glucose dyes are drunk to detect cancer on a scan. Where there is cancer, the glucose dye disappears as it is eaten by the cancer cells. Here's a very quick list of all the other diseases sugar has been directly implicated in and what it adversely affects. Heart disease, especially atherosclerosis, the major cause of heart disease. It also knocks the immune and nervous systems for 6, being a causal factor for bronchitis, sinus infections, colds and coughs, is an irritant to the digestive system due to its high osmotic pressure, sucking water from membranes and tissues, causing inflammation and aiding the development of gastric and duodenal ulcers. Gallstones, acne, dermatitis, adversely affects hormonal production, depression, hypoglycemia, mood swings, Alzheimer's, learning and concentration difficulties, ADD, ADHD, migraines, anxiety, mental disorders, epilepsy, candida, eczema, varicose veins, hemorrhoids. It causes deficiencies in chromium, potassium, calcium, magnesium and copper, lowers levels of vitamins B6, B12 and E, creates bodily inflammation, damages the pancreas and kidneys, affects asthma and multiple sclerosis, causes premature aging and is of course addictive with serious withdrawal symptoms, all of which are far more dangerous than what many believe sugar is mainly responsible for, which is damage to the teeth. Bad teeth won't kill you, but many of the above certainly could. As quick as that list was, there was one major omission: diabetes. The definition of diabetes is an imbalance or irregularity to blood sugar levels. This imbalance is most easily caused by the constant consumption of glucose-forming foods, those processed deadly whites, which make up 80% of the dietary calorific input every day for the majority. In the 1930s, it was understood that diabetes manifested itself as a range of symptomatic diseases. be that heart disease, cancers, depression, kidney disease and obesity, which was very rare then. Depending upon which symptom prevailed, the patient would be treated by a specialist in that particular field. There was no secret about this in the 1930s. It was common medical knowledge that diabetes, if left unchecked, will develop into a very serious deadly disease. Today, for some reason, there is a complete air of mystery about these very diseases, where cancer is seen as bad luck, or depression is blamed on your hormones, or worse, they blame genetics, when for most it is no more difficult to understand than it being too much glucose-forming food being eaten continually. The only reason these diseases are shrouded in a veil of ignorance is obviously because of profits and money. The father of Western medicine, Hippocrates, would be turning in his grave at the deplorable state of health and food today. His famous saying, "Food is your medicine," still holds truth, although sadly for many today it is more true to say, "Food is your poison." Consumption of sugar is totally out of control. When Professor Yukin wrote up his life's research results in his seminal Pure, White and Deadly in 1972, sugar consumption was somewhere in the region of contributing 17% of calorific content to the average diet. A figure he assumed to be so excessive, the rise in cancer and heart disease rates was completely understandable. Today, sugar contributes in excess of 50% of the calorific consumption for many, whilst the diseases associated with this sugar imbalance have continued to escalate, proving there is a definite correlation and that the drugs are most definitely not working. A World Health Organization report on sugar in the early 2000s insisted sugar consumption should never be more than 10% of daily calorific content. The US Sugar Association and the World Sugar Research Organization went ballistic at this proposition, lobbying Congress to abandon its $406 million funding of WHO, threatening to bring WHO to its knees if its report was publicized. WHO have since come out with a 5% recommendation, a figure that would be impossible to achieve if the current food chain is not systematically overhauled. So what is the real average of sugar being consumed, as it is nothing like as small as the 50 kilos often bandied about? This figure is far from the truth. To hammer this home, let's have a look at the average daily diet of a primary school child from the ages of 5 to 11. A survey at my child's school showed that a normal breakfast of a cereal, a packed lunch and a standard dinner with an evening hot chocolate, including a couple of snacks and drinks throughout the day, resulted in 122 grams of added white sugar in the diet of the average 5 to 11-year-old. That's 25 teaspoons, nearly 500 calories every school day. For non-school days, this figure of 122 grams has easily doubled, with many gorging themselves throughout the day with a never-ending carousel of sweet-laced products. As non-school days are half of the year, this makes for a 183-gram daily average, which over a year totals a staggering 67 kilos, over 10.5 stone, or well over 250,000 calories from just refined white sugar, eaten by a primary school child every year. Of course, for a child, the damage to the bodily system is far more dangerous, particularly as they are still developing and dependent on hormonal messages for successful growth. Considering that every level of hormone signalling has been compromised, their welfare, emotional and physical development has been jeopardized at a critical stage of growth, as well as weakening the immune system. Another consideration, often overlooked, is that weight for weight, an adult is easily 4 times the weight of, say, a 6-year-old. So that 67 kilos eaten by a primary school child is equivalent to an adult consuming 275 kilos of sugar a year, which is an unbelievable amount, over 1/4 ton of sugar in a year, and even more amazingly, many people are eating double this and more in a year. I trust you're not confused as to where the foundations to ill health may reside, and that's just sugar. There's 6 more deadly whites to come. If you'd like to understand much more about the dangers of sugar, you might find my new book interesting. Back for the second deadly white dairy soon. See ya!